Venom, Let There Be Carnage, a film so fast-paced it forgot to include a second act, had a rockin' debut, totally decimating pandemic box office numbers. Vis-a-vis, my boss just called and told me to come up with 25 things you might have missed in Venom 2. Or else I'm fired. And, yes, I do work for J Jonah Jameson, and he's a nightmare. So, here are just 25 things you may have missed or just didn't quite understand, or, I don't know, maybe you just want to hang out with some random schlub on the internet to talk about it in a fast-paced manner. Either way, let's dig in. First up, we gotta mention the spider elephant in the room. Spoiler, by the way. Maybe pause and go watch this film before watching a video about stuff you missed. Cool? You done? Pretty good, right? Anyway, a little symbiote lunch meat himself, Tom Holland, makes an appearance on TV during the mid-credit sequence, something I thought we were all trained to stay and wait for, but if my audience was in the indication, that is not the case. J Jonah Jameson also shows up, sorta, in recycled footage, telling us through the Daily Bugle's InfoWars-style show that Spidey is, in fact, noted Mysterio murderer Peter Parker. The shot we get of Pete is different from the coverage we saw at the end of Far From Home, but it gets the idea across that we are, in fact, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, how did we get here? Well, while Venom was teaching Eddie about the vast knowledge of the symbiote hive mind, I guess Doctor Strange just so happened to also be casting his whoopsie spell to erase everyone's memory. Although that does beg the question, why then would Venom be transported to the day Spidey's identity is revealed? I don't know, perhaps it's a new segment about the big reveal. Maybe Strange's spell sent Venom back in the past slightly. Maybe it has more to do with Venom pulling from information across the multiverse. Who knows? Hopefully we will when No Way Home is released later this year. Of course, there are multiple references to Spider-Man outside of him just straight up existing. At one point, Venom states, "Responsibility is for the mediocre," presumably a dig at the famous Uncle Ben line, "With great power comes great responsibility." Now, being an anti-hero, Venom is of course less concerned with responsibility, but more than happy to use that their great power. Or it's referring to the classic Martin Sheen Uncle Ben line. I'm kidding, no. No one ever talks about that one. Also, Cletus crushes a spider. Again, this is not a subtle film.
Like a toad in the wind.
Comic book fans, of course, already have noted the presence of Detective Patrick Mulligan, who bonds with the offspring of Carnage to become the anti-hero Toxin. Now, most outlets have suggested that this revival, after getting his ass whooped by Shriek, is set up for Toxin entering the franchise. While that may very well be the case, it is a bit confounding that his eyes turn the same shade as Shriek's bad eye. I guess not really a bad eye, just the contact lens eye, whatever, suggesting that perhaps he's gotten her powers as well, or instead of his own Toxin abilities. My guess, and this is totally just off the top of my head, so it's based on, nothing but bad lifestyle decisions and a lack of sleep, is that as it was hinted that in this iteration Shriek's power set origins are unknown, whatever was giving her these powers transferred to Mulligan, and he'll become the ultimate symbiote hunter, perhaps even gaining the Toxin symbiote to make for the ultimate hybrid. Or he'll just be forgotten, I don't know. Bonus fun fact, Toxin was co-created by Peter Mulligan, who I guess was having trouble with names that day. Oh, shoot. Okay, this isn't even in my script right now. I totally just remembered this. So, this is just an Easter egg for people who really liked Boardwalk Empire, but we have two Capones in this movie. We have Stephen Graham, who played Al Capone in Boardwalk Empire. He plays Detective Mulligan. And then we have Tom Hardy, who very recently, I think in 2019, also played Al Capone in the film Capone, which I really liked. And I'm like one of 5 people, but hey, that's just me. Anyway, back to the list as I wrote it out. I mentioned Shriek's eye, yeah. She's also shot in the head by a cop in the comics, so that is very much in keeping with her origin. What's not in keeping is the breadth of her powers, including the power to tap into a person's psyche and control their emotions, which is so creepy and weird, I'm kind of bummed that she got bell stomped in the end. Now, being a Marvel property, one little Easter egg that I'm sure you and everyone else, Grandma included, noticed was that the late great Stan Lee pops up on the cover of a magazine, which was also seen in the trailer. Yeah, that's the entire entry. Another as seen in the trailer detail, which I didn't even connect until it was in my face for half the movie, was Eddie Brock's choice of clothing, which is either his midlife crisis leather jacket or his Detroit Lions jacket with the Mumford University t-shirt. Now, if you're an Eddie Murphy fan, you probably noticed that this is a take on Axel Foley's outfit in Beverly Hills Cop, albeit with a darker color scheme in keeping with Venom's appearance, since he is often hiding on Eddie as his boyfriend's, host's clothing in the comics. This was apparently one of many details added by co-writer and producer Tom Hardy, who just really likes Beverly Hills Cop. There's some pretty solid cameos in this film as well, with the most notable being rapper Little Simz, as seen in the Rave sequence, in which Venom hits the town and calls for equality, while also saying he's out of Eddie's closet, making the gay subtext of their squabbling relationship basically just text. Anyway, Little Simz had previously released a song in 2019 entitled Venom, which fans suggested should be in the sequel. Well, it is in a remixed version over the credits, and she gets to act opposite the big boy himself, and hopefully this will catapult her career into the stratosphere. You know, because she released a mixtape called Stratosphere. You get it. Now, another musician whose cameo actually caused me a bit of confusion is Scroobius Pip, who is an English hip-hop artist and spoken word poet who shows up briefly in 2 scenes as an inmate at Ravencroft named Siegfried. Now, why is that character given that name? No idea. As far as I know, the only characters from the comics with that name are like German soldiers and junk, so I don't know, I guess it just sounded cool, man. Future Alfred Pennyworth and former Gollum Andy Serkis directed this entry in Sony's Spider-Man universe, a name which just flows off the tongue like the works of Percy Shelley, doesn't it? And while I'm sure that's not news to you superfans out there, it did strike me as a fun parallel to his work in Lord of the Rings, where he, like Eddie Brock, often had conversations with his darker self. Obviously, he was hired partially for his extensive work in the world of motion capture, but I'd like to think some executive at Sony was like, yeah, let's just hire the dude who talks to himself all the time. Another tidbit you probably noticed because, oh boy, was it in your face, was the product placement in the film, including the likes of Ducati, and this being their property, plenty of Sony products, including a Sony Bravia TV, which Eddie assures Venom is just a great product. Of course, what does Venom destroy when they're having their little tiff, causing quite possibly the biggest emotional reaction from Eddie? Well, the motorcycle and the TV, because, consumerism. Now, there are a ton of instances of the Daily Bugle showing up in Let There Be Carnage, including plenty of physical editions, which don't appear to exist in the standard Marvel Cinematic Universe, at least as far as we've seen. You might also have noticed that Brock has a byline for the article on Cletus Kasady that Shriek is reading in her cell, right before she, shrieks. This is presumably the piece that Eddie was writing when he met Cletus in the stinger for the first film, back when Cletus was going through his perm phase. Now, bonus entry for you non-comic fans, that version of Kasady was more true to the comics, but after everyone laughed at the crappy fright wig poor Woody Harrelson had to wear, it was changed to another hairstyle that is certainly a choice. And, in a moment also called out when the trailer was released, if you look closely, Detective Mulligan's copy of the Bugle features an article that seems to show the words Avengers, Lose, and Nightmare. Is this alluding to the future downfall of the MCU's super team to the villain Nightmare? Probably not, but it sure makes for a good bit of clickbait, doesn't it? Oh, and did you guys make the connection between Venom 2 and Natural Born Killers? I'm not sure how deliberate this was, but the relationship between Cletus Kasady and Shriek bears a striking resemblance to that of Mallory and Mickey in that Woody Harrelson starring film. Now, that couple also, they drive around in a red convertible, although in Venom, the car is a clear reference to the one driven by Cletus and Shriek in Carnage vs. Deadpool. So, you know, it's just layers, man. It's like an onion.
Makes me want to cry.
And if you were curious, the compound phenethylamine, if you're curious, the compound phenethylamine found in brains and chocolate is a real thing, and its inclusion is sourced from the comics. However, the movie misses out on one important detail. That phenethylamine is actually fairly common and is found in numerous meats, beans, seafoods, and certain dairy products. But hey, that wouldn't be as funny as brains and chocolate.
Do you feel me?
Now, this version of Carnage is a bit different from his comic book counterpart, something hardcore fans certainly picked up on. For one thing, his bond with Carnage is far from non-symbiotic in the comics. They're actually kind of a perfect match. Made in hell! Those Also, his relationship with Shriek comes later from his prison break in Maximum Carnage, where they first meet and go on a crime spree. Now, this inclusion, aside from giving us a sick performance from Moneypenny herself, Naomi Harris,
Happy day.
also helps to quell the more R-rated side of everyone's favorite red-headed cannibalistic serial killer. Instead of his motivation being purely to kill and up his body count, Cletus in this is, well, he's doing it for love. Now, whether this was done to give him more depth or to simply get a PG-13 is unknown, but I do know that one of those two things includes way more dollar signs.
I love money.
That Lethal Protector name, by the way, that Venom and Eddie use time and time again, well, that's the name of their 1993 comic book miniseries from when Venom went from villain to antihero. It was the first comic named after the character and gave us our first glimpse into Eddie's background. So, you know, if you want to be a little nerdly and just like correct people all the time, go read that. Lethal Protector was also the comic series partially adapted for the first Venom film, with notable appearances including villain Carlton Drake, the Life Foundation, and the symbiote Riot. This film doesn't really have much to do with that comic outside of dealing with the shift to anti-heroics and, well, the name drop. You know what? This is a filler entry. Moving on. One line that stood out in the trailer was Venom shouting, "That's a red one!" Before hiding within Eddie. Now, it's not explained much in the film, but in the comics, the symbiote offspring are often much more powerful than their parents. As far as I can recall, there's not much reason for a red one to be any more powerful than another, but presumably this ties in with Venom realizing that as his offspring, Carnage is more deadly by default. Although who knows, maybe we'll get like some kind of like color system in future movies. I don't know. Now, Ravencroft Institute is another comics accurate element in Venom. As in the film, this is where the comic book version of Cletus Kasady was born, and it has served as a prison for various Marvel villains over the years. This is also where Cletus first meets Shriek. It was also featured in Amazing Spider-Man 2 as the place where Electro is experimented on by Dr. Ashley Kafka. You all remember that classic scene from that movie that everybody loves, right?
Come on.
Of course, in Venom, our chief doctor is none other than Dr. Camille Pazzo. Pazzo? It doesn't matter. Who is presented as a conservatively dressed older woman, which is pretty funny if you've read Carnage Unleashed, in which Dr. Pazzo is drawn, well, like a doctor in a 90s comic book. Along with Ravencroft, we also get St. Estes' Home for Unwanted Children, which in the comics is the St. Estes Home for boys, presumably changed to facilitate the Shriek relationship. Comics Carnage has his first encounter with Spidey in the burned ruins of St. Estes, which is implied but not confirmed Cletus personally burned down. Meanwhile, in Venom 2, it's a bit more obvious who the culprit is. Going back to Carnage Unleashed, that series also features Carnage essentially hacking computers, in that case in order to travel through the video game based on his life, and I promise I'm not making this up, attack people through the internet. The 90s, man, it was a wild time. Meanwhile, in this film, he does the, I guess more realistic swordfish style hacking in order to find Shriek. Oh, and hey, remember that dog that we didn't see little Cletus kill with a power drill, but he definitely killed with a power drill? Yeah, that also happens in the flashbacks in Carnage Unleashed. Lots of Carnage Unleashed in this movie, actually. There's even a song in the soundtrack titled Carnage Unleashed. Anyway, him throwing Granny down the stairs is also featured, but who cares about that old dame? Did you know that the dog's name is Fifi? Well, now you do, and that little pooch got treated like a wooden board at Habitat for Humanity. Okay, one more from Carnage Unleashed. You know that quick scene where Cletus and Carnage are talking in the car and make an agreement to kill Venom and Eddie, and then Carnage just yeets a truck off the bridge for seemingly no reason? Yeah, that might be a reference to the moment where Dr. Pazzo saves a school bus on a bridge from being run off by Carnage, thereby sending their truck careening off said bridge. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's also really specific, and they're already taking so much from that comic. Like, it has to be, right? Right? Come on. Oh, you know what? Actually, that scene might have also been a reference to the ending of Interview with the Vampire.
I've had to listen to that for centuries.
Probably not, but I just came up in my noggin there. Anyway, finally, number 25. Shoot.
I am starving.
So eat those guys!
I can't. Sonny and Cher are best friends.
Hey, you youngins in the audience. Venom's pet chickens are named after Sonny and Cher, who were a prominent musical duo in the long, long ago of the 1970s. Will we potentially see a sequel in which Sonny the chicken becomes the first poultry elected to Congress? Maybe. Hey guys, thanks for watching my face. This is normally the spot where I'd add a little bonus fact, but I just saw this movie last night and my brain hurts. Well, Let's see. That shot of Carnage in front of the stained glass, totally a callback to the variant cover for Cult of Carnage. Boom. There you go. I'm gonna go to sleep now. Go away.